Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today, and welcome to today's upload. Guys, it is Saturday. Saturday Nightmares, live from New York, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is our live stream. I hope to see you all there tonight. We have a lot of fun, experiences, theories, and it is unlike any other live stream on YouTube. I can tell you that. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below, merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and are appreciated. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? Alright, so on Tuesday, I had ended up speaking to a Methodist pastor. She kind of gave me a rundown of her encounter. We talked for 15-20 minutes. She had things to do, and she said, listen, let's set up a time for Wednesday, the 27th, to talk. I got some stuff that I'd like to share with you, my Dogman experience, and I have some other things that I'd like to share with you that you have spoken about on your channel. We ended up talking for about 2 hours last night. Now, her Dogman encounter happened 8 years ago, prior to her and her husband having their first child. They had been camping in an area called Frenchman Lake, at a campground called Frenchman Campground. Now, this is where things get real weird, because as we are talking about her experience, she has me pull up this lake, and it's a very odd kind of lake. There's a couple of bays in there. It's not a circular lake. It's just rather weird looking. So they end up going kayaking, and from their campground, they brought their own kayaks. Apparently there's a kayak rental place on the lake. And they were going up north on Frenchman Lake to this kind of area where they could just dock and go hiking, have a little picnic, and not be bothered, really. They started their day off pretty early, and they were on the lake for a couple of hours, just kayaking around the lake. You know, they were young, in their 20s, late 20s, just relaxing. This is weird though here, because this lake in the middle of California has two very strange points. One is called Snellygaster Point, and the other is Nightcrawler Bay. Now, her and I were talking, and she had mentioned that name. And she said, I heard you say that name before on the channel. And I looked it up because she remembered that point on that lake where she had her experience. And what a snellygaster is it's a reptilian bird-like chimera originating in superstitions of early German immigrants, later combined with sensationalistic newspaper reports of a monster. Early sightings associate the snellygaster with Frederick County, Maryland, especially the areas of South Mountain and Middletown Valley. Later reports would expand on sightings encompassing an area to include central Maryland and the Washington, D.C. metro area. This is 18th, 19th, and all the way up to the 20th century. And I have heard experiences reported about this snellygaster coming off mountains and attacking people. And then obviously the nightcrawler, which is some sort of kind of crawler-like cryptid that stalks the night. So that was really kind of weird when she had me pull up this map and I saw these points on there, and I was like, there are 2 points on this lake that are cryptid named. So back to the experience. I just wanted to share that with y'all. They end up getting up to an area where they could pull their kayak out of the water, kind of beach it, and go on a little hike. There's not many people in the area. They knew their kayak would be safe. And if worse come to worse, they could actually walk or hike down around the lake to get back to their camp. There's there's a kayak rental agency on there. There's some areas where civilization is, but not a lot. So they get their picnic set up and they're relaxing, kind of planning the rest of their vacation. They were going to travel north and do a little more camping, a little more hiking and stuff. Prior to their first child, they were fairly outdoorsy. She said, she wasn't, her and her husband were not diehard, rock climbing, kayaking. That's all we live for. This was a vacation that was fairly cheap and something they both enjoyed. So they get their picnic all set up and they hike out a little bit. They realize how beautiful this area is. There's a lot of just beautiful trees and fauna, and they are really having the time of their life, just walking around. And all of a sudden, the husband kind of grabs her arm and says, I think I just saw something off to my right out of the corner of my eye. I don't know what it was, but are there bear in this area? And she immediately kind of stops because she's her and her husband are small people. She's about 5'2". Her husband's about 5'7". And, so that's an easy meal for a real hungry bear. So they kind of stop and they're looking, and they both agree, hey, let's kind of slowly back up and make our way back to where we had our picnic. We're not too far from there. We're about 5-10 minutes away from our picnic area, 15-20 minutes from our kayaks. Let's just really, not make it known that we know it's out there. If we see our picnic area kind of rummaged through, then we know it's a bear, and we will cross that bridge when we have to, if we need to run or what. They did not have any kind of firearm or any kind of bear mace or anything with them. This was just, supposed to be an easy going trip. They get turned around and they start walking. Now, the husband, again, is on her right. So if the bear was to come out, it would come out to his side and see him first, possibly attacking him first. They start heading to their picnic area, and they start to smell this very rancid roadkill stench. She compared it to almost like a skunk, but not so skunky. A musky kind of just really bad urine smell. They both kind of get the whiff of it, and they look at each other like, I've never ever heard bear smelling like this. Why are we smelling something similar to roadkill when we are in the middle of, nowhere? They are looking around, trying to figure out if this bear is behind them, on the side of them, in front of them. They're now walking at a quicker pace. They're not running, they're not jogging, but they've got a little bit of pep in their step at this point. The stench is staying with them. And at that point, her and her husband knew that whatever was producing this smell was mobile. It wasn't a dead animal. Because, if you walk upon a carcass, you will get hit hard by that stench, and then you continue walking and you'll still smell it, but it eventually kind of dissipates in the air. This isn't. And they now kind of are like, they're talking quietly. Do we go back to get our picnic stuff? We have our essential needs. All's that there is our blanket and our basket. They don't have anything of value there. And they're like, if we avoid going back to where the picnic area, where we had our picnic, and we continue to kind of go diagonally the way they're going, they can shave off a couple of minutes from their trip to get to their kayaks. At that point, they're like, all right, we'll figure it out. If it continues to feel like we are being followed, we'll just go the way we're going and ignore the picnic basket. there's this kind of sporadic area of trees, and then there's this kind of large grouping of trees, kind of tight, maybe 20, 30 large pine, just boom, right there. They're in the woods, but it's sporadic. But then there's this kind of grouped section of large trees. She is on the left. Still, the husband, they feel like this thing may be coming from the right, because that's where the husband initially kind of saw something from his peripheral. As they are passing this kind of grouping of trees, they hear a noise which kind of sounded like a very deep, reverberating growl. Almost like it didn't want them to hear it, but it just instinctually growled. And they both kind of turn and stop and look. And standing by this tree is this 7.5 to 8 foot Dogman staring at them. It is jet black. There's no gray on its chest. There's no kind of, it's just jet black. But its ears and around its muzzle are this silver color. And she immediately thinks, my God, there's a werewolf. We're staring at a werewolf. So in her head, being that she is a minister, she had gone to college for, theology and all that. She did years of college. And she had only been a minister for a couple of years at that point. But as everything she's, heard growing up and stuff, werewolves are evil, possibly demonic. I thought they were make-believe, but now I'm looking at one, and she starts to recite prayer, thinking that it will push this creature away and protect them, put the armor of God upon them. And it cocks its head because she's, loudly saying the prayer, and it cocks its head at her. And she could see that it was kind of manipulating the experience, It was not being affected by prayer, but it knew what it was doing by turning its head like, what the hell are you doing? Do you really honestly, almost as it understood what was going on? And it probably did. It smirks at her, or what she took as a smirk. And the reason why she took it for a smirk is because immediately after, it let out this just real and loud growl this time, to where they both heard and felt it, and just dropped to all fours, kind of sprinted 20 feet away, turned back around and looked at both of them, and shot into the woods. They are now abandoned their picnic basket and are speed walking to their kayaks. They are not running because, obviously both knew that you don't run from a predator. And that's what they both felt like this thing was a predator. And as they get to their kayaks, they're like, all right, we don't need anything. They push off into the lake, get into their kayak, and start to paddle. They start to discuss, what was that? Have you ever heard of anything like that? Neither one has, except for movies. And they start heading back to their location of their camp, Frenchman Campground. Now, they get to the middle of the lake. They kind of position themselves to the middle of the lake because they're both freaked out. What if this thing, let's not stay too close to shore like we did coming here, but let's kind of get in the middle of the lake. Put your life jacket on in case of, whatever. They're talking, kayaking, paddling through. It's a good ways back to camp. And they're discussing what they had just seen. She's like, I don't believe that was a demonic creature. I truly believe that, that was flesh and blood. That was not bothered by prayer at all. And her husband agrees. They get past this area and there's a narrow kind of channel to get to the wider section of the lake and then to Frenchman Campground. It's not wide at all. And as they get to the middle of this section, they see this Dogman running along the shore of the lake. There's no people there. There's, no camps there. This thing is just running and it's staring off at them. And there's, like I said, this is a very narrow channel. All of a sudden it stops, stands up, and kind of howls as they are going past this thing. Mind you, they're still in the middle of the channel, staying away from the shore. And this Dogman jumps into the water. It stood on its hind legs, howled kind of, dropped to all fours, and just proceeded to jump. At that point, they are freaking out. They start rowing faster because they can't see where it went. It's underwater for a split second. And if anyone's ever had an encounter, you know that split seconds seem like minutes, seem like hours. As they get to the opening of this narrow kind of channel in the lake, they're looking all around, and behind them, probably a football field away, pops this head. And it's 3/4 of the way across that channel. and they just lose it. They start paddling and they get to their campsite. They get to Frenchman Campground. The last time they saw the Dogman was when it got to shore and proceeded to almost run straight into the woods. They get to their camp area and, they pull their kayaks out of the water. They decided that they were cutting this trip out of their... They were done. And they had, a couple of days planned, and then they were going to move on. Well, now they're heading home. As they're packing, they're panicking. And they never saw it again from that point on. But it's so strange that this lake has two cryptid kind of names. And this Dogman jumped into the water and crossed, and prayer did not work. Just a very, very bizarre experience. From that point on, she then started to kind of deep dive into cryptozoology. The first couple of books she buys is from Nick Redfram, and starts to kind of deep dive on what little bit of information she can find online. Shortly thereafter, they have their first child, and they now kind of have given up camping. It's all about family now, and her career as a minister or pastor. And she found it odd that how it knew what she was doing, and that smirk, and then to mess with them and run around the lake watching them, stalking them, but not harming them, was probably the most traumatic for her. Because when this thing jumped into the lake in that narrow channel, and it is narrow, she thought for sure that it was going to capsize their kayaks and, have dinner. Now, periodically, her and her husband will talk about the experience. She did say that she is going to inform, her children that there are things in the wilderness that mainstream news and such does not speak about. There are dangerous things out there. And when, her children are older, she will share her experience with them, which I think is awesome, truly amazing. Now, during her ministry, or Methodist being a pastor, she talks to people and does these kind of spiritual or religious guidance or whatever. Me being brought up Roman Catholic, I, said, what is it, like confession? And she said, no, we, if a parishioner needs advice, or they just kind of need some guidance, if they feel like they're losing a connection to Christ, that they'll come and sit and discuss and give that person guidance. Well, she shed some light on something that I've heard about, and I know many of you have as well, that really kind of blew me away. And it's so she is and mind you, she did not share the person's name with me, nor did she make up a name, and she kept the locations kind of vague. So I'm going to hand you what she handed me. So she had a parishioner that she's known for about 4 years. She got to know the family. This gentleman's mom and dad are part of the church, and this and that. And I guess the mom approached her and said, my son is having a hard time with his faith. He's turned to alcohol abuse. He's drinking a lot. And he's questioning, he's questioning his faith, and he's questioning if God really cares about us or him per se. So she sits down with this young man. He's in his mid-20s. Had been in the army, and also was brought up Methodist his entire life. His parents were very religious, and his mom and dad are good people. His family are, just decent people, and he has, kind of lost his faith, and he's questioning, God and this and that, Jesus, and making statements to his mom that kind of scare her. Like he's contemplating, doing something bad to himself, on top of drinking every day and night for the last year since he had gotten out of the army. What he shares with her didn't blow her away at all, because of her experience that she had and kind of her deep dive online to figure out what these things were, and what the she just wanted to learn as much information about the paranormal, supernatural, cryptids, everything that we are into. And he informs her that during his last 2 years of being in the military, that he had been sent to 2 undisclosed national parks, one in Idaho, the other being in Montana. And with the Army. Now, why? She asks. Because there are things that our government knows about that we go out there with scientists that work for our government as kind of like a backup to make sure that nothing happens to these scientists as they are exploring this kind of cryptid paranormal events. And the things that he saw made him, kind of lose faith. In one of these national parks, as they get to this national park in one of these states, there had been a company already there. They apparently were backing this company up on whatever had went down. Apparently, what they saw in this very large national park about 3 years ago was a very large humanoid, not a Bigfoot, but Nephilim. And after that, at least 2 more squads came in. In total, there were around 150 soldiers in this national park 3 years ago because of a sighting of a giant. Mind you, Idaho, Montana, national parks. Think about them. That'll put it into perspective, maybe which park you can. 3 years ago, I have heard rumor from people that yes, there were a large amount of military occupation or whatever you want to call it in these parks for a giant. Now, Nephilim, they did not engage in this. He did see signs of it, like footprints, large footprints, and tools. That started off his kind of, why are these things here if God loves us? Why are these Nephilim here if God loves us? What is the point of that? And the final thing that they saw, and I will tell you, this one happened in Idaho, in a national forest. There was a portal that opened up, and during that mission or whatnot. Like 4 or 5 scientists that work for the military went out and worked for the government and went out. And there were upwards to 90 soldiers accompanying them. They did engage with something that came out of the portal. She got a brief kind of experience from the guy. And apparently they had been posted up. The scientists had all of their equipment out in the woods in this region where this portal had been spotted by these scientists. He doesn't know how they spotted them. He doesn't know, anything. He just knows that he was there to accompany the scientists for their safety. At one point, they located the portal. Of course, the guys are all freaked out because, and bullshitting with each other, but still freaked out. Like, what the hell is that? There was some very weird feelings in their body. He said that his kind of mind chemistry felt weird. He felt like he was lightheaded, and all the other soldiers complained of like this lightheadedness, kind of this, just their bodies felt weird. The third day they were there accompanying these scientists, the scientists had started taking kind of measurements or whatever with their equipment, and there was this kind of loud bang, like an earthquake noise, just this eruption of sound. And 2 of the scientists instantly kind of just disappeared. The other 3 ran back towards the soldiers. The soldiers were all armed with live ammunition. They're all looking at this area where the scientists just disappeared. Like that. In a split second, it looked, what he said to Pastor Meredith was that it looked almost like if you fold a picture and you start to make one side fit the next, like a rift kind of opened up, and there was this dull, dark light that came out, and this 6-legged creature kind of appeared out of nowhere. The scientists were with the soldiers' commanding officers, and after its appearance, within 15 seconds, they were told to shoot whatever came out of that area. As they're shooting this 6-legged creature, and it's trying to go backwards into where it had just came from. They're bullets that are not hitting. They can see their rounds almost kind of stop above this thing and fall to the ground. They did end up killing the thing. And what it looked like was something out of Greek mythology. It was like a cross between 3 animals. It was probably 10 feet long. It had a very strange like tail. It looked like it had armor underneath, kind of hair, sporadic hair. It was a chimera. It was, its eyes as it was staring at the soldiers, as when it came out, its eyes were this just black, just this blackness in its eyes. Its head resembled that of an alligator or some sort of reptile, but it had hair. Once they knew that it was dead and subdued, there was some discussion made. The scientists went over accompanied by, some other soldiers. They tried to move it, and it was far too heavy. What they ended up having to do was they pulled it with one of their vehicles. They attached like a chain to it and towed it or pulled it away from the portal region, the area where these 2 scientists, and they never reappeared. And about 2 hours later, another vehicle came with kind of a bobcat-like vehicle and loaded it up onto a trailer and drove away. At that point, he had talked to other soldiers about what they had witnessed and stuff like that. And seeing a Nephilim-like creature and then seeing like a chimera, this soldier, ex-military, is now having a hard time with his faith. And he said, if, Jesus does love us, then why? Why are these things, are we in the end of times? Is this the end of times? Breaking down to the pasture. And she had no answers for him. She felt compelled to share her and her husband's Dogman encounter with him, but didn't. And she's working with him to restore his faith, But I can see why someone would lose, their faith. He's brought up very religious, good family, small town, Indiana kid, born and raised in the same town, same house, just going to church weekly, very just kind of that Americana life his family lived. And then he experienced these crazy things. And he is trying to regain faith. And I think, and I said this to her, I said, I can see why he'd question his faith. I sometimes say to myself, if there is, if God is out there and Jesus is there, why is this stuff happening? Why are these creatures here? Why are dumbs? Why did dumbs occur? Why did dulce occur? Why did this happen? And her response to that, because I started asking that to her. And her simple response was, because that's how it's supposed to be. That's what God wants. And that blew me away. And she said a prayer with me. And it was a very interesting 2 hours. And I said, how is that? How is he? How is he doing? And he's still battling his own demons, his alcoholism, but his faith is slowly, coming back. His drinking is slowly, stopping. But he has, bouts of frustration and questioning his faith. So, crazy interview. Wonderful person. Wonderful woman. Just a great person, and for her to say, hey, when my children are older, I'm going to allow them to know that these things are out there so they don't get put in danger. But until they're, old enough to understand what I'm sharing, I'm going to warn them, hey, be careful by the woods. There are things out there. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives. Till next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. And God bless you all.